Okay. I wanted to talk to everybody or just get this out. It's 12:38 p.m. on the 1st of July 2026. And within my deep dive into spiritualism and religion and the state of the union within the United States and the heritage of the people indicative of the name of Tiamat or Amari within the proper depiction of what this land was, both from the north and the south, all the way up to the tip top of Canada and down to the bottom of Chile. Since we, or at least I have found out that we were all connected at one point, and that's why the Americas are the name from up to south, from the north to the south, and we imply other names on them to try and imply a sense of fracture of what we are rather than just acknowledging what it is that we are. One of the things that I would like to mention is my name is Amar Rami Jackson Jr. If you want to know anything about my faith, I am a Christian who follows the truth of Christ within the story of Christ and the walk of all the prophets, to include Mani. So you could say I'm Maniacism, and if you want to know a sect, or Valentinius in the form of Joseph, because I know I am a son of Joseph and my blood goes back to that of the Canaanites. Um, I would like to also acknowledge my ancestors and the ancestors of this land who have been the only reason that I have been able to curate just where I'm at in life. You know, everybody knows that it's hard to find something that you could hold on to, and I finally figured that out. In the form of just holding on to everything and seeing what actually floats and what doesn't, testing it to the weight of a feather or the weight of the knowledge it contains, and then asking ancestors, asking myself, asking the peace of my serenity, my sovereignty about what that is. So what I was getting at, and now that the intro is kind of done, um, one of the things that I looked into is obviously at the beginning of Christ's walk, and looked at what was going on during his day. One of the things I found out was Zoroastrianism, or the inclination of the monogod. That was done through Zoroaster and the followers thereof. Within it, you have the prophet known as Mani, who preached the dual dexterity of both law within the both law and humanity, I would say, within the story of the angels, showing the truth of the fight between the darkness and the light, and that's just being conscious and dwelling within the subconscious, not actually curating your own thoughts, but allowing thoughts to be implied on you, and you taking that as its as substance rather than you, expanding upon it and trying to find something within it yourself. One of the things that you go to is the hymns, and we know that the hymns are still done through people who follow Zoroaster, and the Zoroastrian priests are supposed to be the ones who killed Mani in his day. And if you look at Mani's death, it's very similar to the death of Christ, and the way he was accepted or non-acceptance of his teachings were inclinations of exactly how Christ would have been treated in his day. And you'll see that when you start to look at it, if you choose to, that they actually do imply very much so that he is one and of the same, at least in the form of the treatment as Christ. So I want to read this. It's called the Sacred Gathras of Zarathrustra and the Old Aveston Canon, a modern translation of ancient wisdom. The reason why I would like to read this is because I have reason to believe that they use the ancient hymns as a form of contacting certain spirits, just to basically put their will upon them, so that that spirit, if praised, still continues to do the works of whatever or whomever is praying to it. Me dwelling and looking down into my faith, I connected myself to the prophets of every religion within the inclination of the first man. So anything between them, essentially something that I could hold on to because it's part of my life. Because if an inclination of who I am was there at the beginning of days and it's here now, then I had a place within my ancestry from then to now. So I wanted to go ahead and read it. I'll read the back for you as well. It says Zarathrustra, Gathras, and the old Aveston Canon are the central texts of Zoroastrianism, one of the oldest continuously practiced religions in the world that has had a vast influence on the development of many other religions, philosophies, global ethics, and more. Period. Composed more than 3,000 years ago, they remain surprisingly evergreen in their relevance. With this new and innovative translation, Pablo Vasquez, a Zoroastrian scholar and convert, sheds new light on these sacred texts of eternal wisdom in a way that makes them acceptable to a modern audience. And then here it says a critical resource for students and scholars of Zoroastrian tradition, faithful and beautiful, rigorous while remaining accessible, a profound achievement and contribution to the field, Dr. Michael Muhammad Knight, religious studies scholar and author. And here it says Pablo Vasquez, born in Panama and now living in Texas, is a scholar, author, translator, game writer, lecturer, and essayist. Currently working on their second graduate degree. Pablo's first degree was MA in Religions of Asia and Africa from SOAS, University of London. While there, they were affiliated with the Shaporji Balanji Institute of Zoroastrian Studies, where they learned Zoroastrian history, theology, and the Aveston language. Pablo is also unique as an officially accepted convert into Zoroastrianism. One thing that I would like to note about Zoroastrian during the age of Mani, or during the age of Jesus, they were looking for the Shai of Shais. Shai of Shais is like the King of Kings, or in other words, the Lord of Lords. It was within a certain bloodline. You'll see, if you guys want me to look more into it and read into the actual people who were the Zoroastrian kings and princes, you would know that the original king who was there underneath, when Mani was doing his teachings, accepted Mani, the second king, which is his son, which would be more connected to Hormazda. He did not, and he allowed the preachers to influence him, and that's when he dies. Manny dies in that same year. He dies, and then there's a fight between his son and his brother, and that happens, and eventually his brother's lineage takes over underneath the house of Susan, and they take over until the end of the days of Zoroastrian rule within the Persian Empire. Because this is all Persian. Come on, doctrine within their religion. So, what people are saying about the sacred Gathras of Zarathrustra and the old Aveston Canon, beneficial to those who want to understand the primary message of Zarathustra as recited in the Gathras. I'm going to also turn my screen, and I'll write some things down while I read, if that is okay for you guys. You could do that Zoom thing that you were looking at doing earlier. I'm talking to the There it goes. Beneficially to those who want to understand the primary message of Zarathustra as recited in the Gathas. Homi D. Gandhi, former president of Fezana, which is the Federation of Zoroastrian Association of North America, and current co-chair of the Fezana Interfaith Activities Committee. The Gathas of Zoroastra, as translated by Pablo Vasquez, are very easy to follow and understand. The Aveston approach in the translation is highly commendable. I would highly recommend this book, Mobed Kerman Katrak, Zoroastrian Priest, North American Mobed's Council. It is way past time that our religion, history, and culture is told through a lens that reflects our community and our people. Pablo Vasquez's translation corrects decades of false reliance on under-informed and biased translations made by Eurocentric translators that didn't care to deliver the deeper meanings of Gathras through their translation. This book will help us and our next generation fully capture the deep meanings of the Gathas in ways that were never before captured. Parshan Krasravi, co-chair of Zoroastrian Youth of North America and chair of the Seventh World Zoroastrian Youth Congress, a critical resource for students and scholars of Zoroastrian tradition, faithful and beautiful, rigorous while remaining accessible, a profound achievement and contribution to the field. Dr. Michael Muhammad Knight, religious studies scholar and author of Muhammad's Body, Baraka Networks, and the Prophetic Assemblage. Pablo Vasquez, through a convert of Zoroastrianism, is a true lover of Zoroaster. His is a fresh and revolutionary voice necessary in the faith and the world over. His translation of the Gathras, the only hymns of Zarathrustra we have, are important because they make clear that these core texts of Zoroastrianism reject the precepts of bigotry and intolerance found in some later Sasanian texts. Sasanian was the brother. I said Susan, I meant Sasanian, but Susan is Sasanian if you understand how to imply the truth of the Persian Empire upon it. As a queer Zoroastrian, I wish nothing but success for this book and call for all Zoroastrians to welcome the LGBTQ plus community to which the translator and I belong. Hashang Merchant, modern India's first openly gay major poet and author of Yorana, Gay Writings from South Asia. This is an accessible version of the Gathas written by the author for modern audiences. The author's passion for Zoroastrianism and knowledge of it is clearly evident from the very first pages, a great addition to any collection in the topic. Payam Nabraz, author of The Mysteries of Mithras and the editor of Anahidra, ancient Persian goddess and Zoroastrian Yazata. So this is like obviously the stuff in the beginning. And I would like to note or write something before we continue. I'll write the name of Sasanian, just because apparently those are the texts that paint it in a improper light. Akan çok nakam burti hiç farkı bile kaptan please, if you me speaking in tongues offends you, it's how I speak to the higher entity of self to be able to pull down downloads and understand some things throughout the book. I open myself for spirit and my higher version of my soul, as my name is Amar Ramin Jackson Jr., which is essentially a call to my birthright within the name as a child of any Abrahamic faith and a studier of law and truth within the wisdom and the dissemination of the truth through the lives of all our ancestors. So it comes through, but if you guys want me to do an unedited, like an edited version where I skip that portion of my research, I'll do that. But this is the full unedited version. One thing I would like to note is that through the faith of Muhammad in the Abrahamic faith within Christianity, Catholicism, the faith of Judaism, the Shias within the Islamic portion of the faith. If you study the doctrines of any faith, none of them preach hate, but the preachers of those faiths may have used the doctrines to preach faith, and upon their further writings or further teachings of the original doctrines, we get some that do have hate speech, and that is something to note. And we should logically and consciously accept the teachings and the root teachings of all of them for what it's meant to, because God makes no mistakes. But however, we should separate the teachings from the man and the man from the teachings, and understand how consciousness came into the man to curate the teachings and what it is meant for us to receive the message. And so I do that, and I just open that and make it and say it because I follow spoken law, or my religion is spoken word, because that is how God fashioned said, "Let there be light," and there was. Um, there's a reason why he says, if you're in a safe space, don't let your tongue adhere to the top of your mouth, and allow the truth to be spoken, and know that your tongue is the whip of the body, but the tongue will set you free because the truth is who you are outside of what you think you are. And so my tongue does that, and to stop myself from saying certain things that may offend people, I say it in a tongue that they may or may not understand. And if they understand who I am, they understand what these tongues are. And they're of me, but indicative of a life that I previously lived and not the life that I'm currently living in front of you guys. Well, it is indicative of the life I'm living in front of you, but I'm saying like the source of the information or the source of the language is not me being born in fucking Torrance, California, and being raised in Paris, California, and having roots. It is indicative of my roots within the Aracaro of Louisiana and my father's Choctaw blood and my other father, which is my brother's father, which is the Cherokee blood, which is in essence of the state of Tijuana, or Texas, which was created by his dad's people and my mom's people. So, let that be whatever it needs to be for whoever that needs to be. The sacred Gathras of Zarathrustra and the old Aveston Canon. The contents, I will tell you guys where the chapter ends and put it up in little marks because I realized this is already 16 minutes and 45 seconds in. But it's the preface for the translator's notes, Aveston's glory, the holy mantras, Druyatya Hu Vairya, and Hashem and Voihu, and Yenghe Atam, and then the Hunavrati Gatha, and the Yasna Haptar Ganjati, and the Ushtavreta Gathra, and the Spentimanyo Gathra, and the Voyuk Shatra Gatra, and the Vahishtori historic Ishti Gatra, and the holy mantra of the Aryama Ishyo, and the author's biography and a note to the readers. I have read some of this already, and there is portions of this that are supposed to be read multiple times, and I'll go ahead and do that. But after the first inclination, I'll tell you I will read it 2 more times or whatever it is, just to be significant of what this is, because I don't want to, I told you guys I don't want to be influenced by the writer. I want to be influenced by the teachings. So, pretty face. What you're about to read is the core and the central text, or what you're about to hear is the core and the central text for one of the oldest, most complex, and heavily influential spiritual traditions in history, Mazdayansa, known popularly in the English-speaking world as Zoroastrianism, was once the world's largest religion, with its influence stretching from China to Egypt. But now, as of the time of this writing, it could very well number less than 150,000 in declared adherents. With a theology and cosmology that continuously adapts and evolves to its historically geographic circumstances without sacrificing its essence, it is also exceedingly versatile, which has allowed it to survive all sorts of calamities and massive changes during its more than 3,000-year history. The Gathas, the poems of Zoroaster, and the surrounding old Aveston canon are some of the oldest spiritual texts still extant to us, and they remain the main unchanging core of Mazdayansa, which all adherents, no matter their theological and philosophical orientation, hold in common as dear and sacred. This translation is my gift back to the Mazdayansa, as it is the source of not just my journey towards the path of Asha, but also the very core of my ethics. This book is not a declaration of my theological outlook, but merely an attempt to provide the best and more accessible translation I could provide for the modern seeker. The reader can read more about my translations process in the translation notes section of the book, but note here, as I repeat elsewhere, that this work was a combination of academic rigor, poetic display, and most importantly to me, devotional action. It is my deepest desire that you gain as much wisdom from the Gathras as so many have before in history. I definitely have, and in these times of chaos and turmoil, these texts bring a new clarity to our realities. All thanks, worship, adoration, and praise are due to Arhara. Ahura the source of all, to the glorious Ashavan, Zarathustra, Thrushtra, Zarathrustra, and the Yazatra, and the Fravashis of the Ashavans, past, present, and future. And to my honored ancestors, many grateful thanks to the professors, former and current, at the Shaporchi Balanchi Institution of Zoroastrian Studies at SOAS University of London, who have enriched my academic knowledge of Mazdayansa, especially my dear supervisor, Dr. Sarah Stewart. Your work towards the academic preservation and study of Mazdayansi knowledge makes you all Ashavans and the treasures of our community. I also declare blessings upon my Mazdayansi community, from those who have welcomed to those who have not, and especially to my fellow converts who strive to learn and worship as Mazdayansis. My praise to Mobed Behram Debu, who conducted my Navjate Setre Bushi, and to my dear and wonderful Mazdayansi friends who have become so many that to list them here would need a section of its own. Your warmth and welcome of me will never be forgotten, and know I treasure our friendships fully. Lastly, but not least, love and gratefulness to my family, my partners, and my non-Mazdayansi friends and colleagues who have been blessings to me throughout my work and life. Ushtate, which is joy be upon you. So ushtate. I'm gonna write that in my book, and I'll also write it up here. This black is pretty crappy, so let's do it again right here. Ushtate, blessings be upon you, and may the word of Zarathrustra enlighten you. PV 2021. So, excuse me. 4. The thing that has always inspired me most about the teachings of Zarathustra is the exhortation of us, or for us, to take part in a cosmic struggle against the forces of darkness. For Zarathustra, it is struggle between two forces, Asha and Thruj, truth and falsehood. Write that one down. So Asha and I'll do Thruj in a different color. So Asha and Thruj. In case you guys don't see, this is my name, my name is Akramad, like I told you guys before. I did the double J because I'm a child of Utu through the ethers, so I put the E because I'm Ea within the Jesuit Jews and the Jains. And so then my name is HMAD. A is indicative of my sign, I'm junior, so that's why this is more kind of like a theta that's open, and you see the A pointing down as far as like a Sagittarius arrow or what have you, because my father is the Sagittarius and I'm the Scorpius, so I'm the, I'm Ophiuchus if you really care, but we ain't talking about that right now. And the H in with the H being high because the H is the O to the head and the N being an O to my body, which is my sign, or what is encompassed within my body. But it's casted down here in the form of this body. Okay, back where we were. For Zarathustra, it is a struggle between two forces, Asha and Thruj, which is the truth and falsehood. One leads towards fulfillment, wholeness, and entity, or wholeness or eternity, power and love. the other to pain, oppression, suffering, and death. Zarathustra's teachings have certainly directly impacted on all our lives through the revolutionary ideas of the Gathras that have significantly influenced both directly and indirectly Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Baha'ism, Greek philosophy, and more. Indeed, they have been more moral compass of the Western civilization they have been the moral compass of the Western civilization and beyond. However, the idea I find most empowering is that it is every man and woman's free will what to do, their responsibility as to which path to take. It is we human beings who, by choosing truth and justice every day, over and over, bring about the victory of Asha. The teachings of my prophet Zarathrustra have been the inspiration behind my drive towards the public service, fighting injustice and founding the Asha Sintra in the royal forest of Dean, Britain. My aim has been to help people all over the world, especially the young, to navigate the challenges of our contemporary and unpredictable world. The Asha Sintra is the place where people connect with each other in joyful community, immerse themselves in the inspirational beauty of nature, and address profound issues of personal development and the betterment of society. In other words, to choose to live magnificent lives, the idea of human agency is embedded in the frame story of Gathras. Zarathustra's own words. The story tells how the soul of the cow appeals to the creator for a protector. For the ancient Indo-Iranians, the soul of the cow was a symbol of Mother Nature, a beautiful image of the earth as gentle, feminine, and nourishing. But here, as now in need of protection against the forces of pillage and wrath, what I find especially fascinating is that this story is also found within Indian literature in the Sanskrit epics of Puranas. The tale, therefore, must have been an especially ancient one, an Indo Iranian story told before the one people split into two nations. However, there is a difference in the later Indian version of the story, and it is revealing in the Indian versions, probably written at least 1,000 years or so after Zarathustra, the cow's appeal results in the great god himself, Vishnu, descending to earth in human form, as the avatars Rama or Krishna. In the more ancient Iranian version in the Gathras, it is not the creator Ahura Mazda who deals with the problem directly, but instead a man, a weak poet, Zarathrustra, who is sent. Kwangile chunkonta sivra kalem choka vesivra parking kingi kali konchora katsandu kotar. Koliki gasu rata conchele vraka tansi tiki gali kiki chikacha vranda rati kikali gocho vrata zer kontutara. What I also said is, if you know anything about the cow, this is connecting both the Indian religion of the Hashema Pantiviriki, the Vedic traditions within their version of moksha, back to the truth of Buddhism through the mantras in the form of the Gathras, through the Persian Empire, through the Zoroastrian nation, but it's also connecting them to the original gods or the original man within the Egyptians because they praise the cow of themselves, which was the Father Gabriel underneath the sky Anut, if you understand who he is, or the cow of Hathor. So that was just like me making the connections. And as I got this book here that talks about the 4,000 years of the Jewish people, they coming out and saying things to me, and it's just, I can't help but listen. I can't help but be afflicted to the truth of the knowledge. And for those who want to keep in and stay connected, after this book, we going to read this one. This is the truth, or three jewels of three. Take refuge in the three jewels and keep the five precepts, which is about the great Buddha. And so I'll go from there. This is where the difference gets especially interesting because the Zoroastrian version, the cow then complains, Asha itself must intervene to justify the sending of a mere man. This suggests, I think, that the Zoroastrian version of the story, even though it's much older, was the more unusual and innovative version of the ancient myth story. Why else would there be a need for justification? The Indian version just finishes the descent of Vishnu, an uncontroversial act by the god in comparison to the sending of Zarathustra. But what does this difference mean? I think it shows that the poet of the Gathras wanted to emphasize the importance of human agency. For him, divine grace salvation of the world would come through human beings freely choosing to act for the good, and for the people of ancient Iran and India, this was a new idea. The older I have become, the more depth I have found in the Zarathrus pioneering and the empowering idea of free will. He does not prescribe what is and is not to be done in demanding terms. Rather, for him, it is the consciousness behind the deed that matters. In Zarathustra's language, Vohu Mana, the right mentality. I'm gonna write that one down too, boys. Mana. One thing that I would say, just a caveat for those who are afflicted to me teaching, I didn't know I'd make we ain't even really in, but I want to get all this out before I get into the meat and potatoes. I follow me being one who follows spoken word because that's how God fashioned us in His image. Understands what it means to make a covenant and to be a child of word, and because the word is who we are as the word made flesh. Seeing that we have a fleshly body means that we have an earthly existence and we are man. Knowing that we are man, but we can escape our earthly vessels by way of the gods within this truth of the tongue and opening and liberation are elaborating within the mind's eye and finding thyself outside of self within eternity and all existence. I, unlike the author, connect myself to that of the gods. So I know that the gods were just men who were able to exceedingly change their physical vessel by expanding their mind and understanding that the word follows consciousness. That would mean that your body is made whole within its birth, but once you become conscious, your body changes to that of its truth, which is why Moses died the way he walked, and why Buddha died the way he walked, which is one and the same if you ask me, but we're gonna have to really study and get into it. That's just how I feel. That's just how I feel. Because if you know any things about those people who really reach a state of moksha, which is known today throughout the Buddhist faiths and the different faiths within the Indian diaspora of the Vedic traditions, you will find that they are able to reach a certain level of moksha when their body passes, that their body is essentially kept within the state that it left and it does not see decay. And what happens more than often is they then take the body and they sacrifice it to the flame because the flame is the all-seeing, all-knowing, all-encompassing element of the world because everything is fashioned in its flames because in order for us water is one thing, but if we understand the flame is forever changing and it's the one thing that rebirths in its despair. Hence the reason why the phoenix is like the highest creature. In case you didn't know, my name is Anu. You know what Anu means? You feel me? You feel me? Anu, Shamshak. I'm Scorpion and the Scorpio is rising. The double Scorpio. What's the final form of the Scorpio? The phoenix. But we ain't gonna get into that one right now. But you get what I'm trying to say, my doc. Kingi chakran Okay, where was I? Go ahead. Okay, so in the Zarathustra's language, Voihu or Vohu, Vohu, Mana, Manah, the right mentality. I like that It seems flexible and subtle, appropriate to the complexities of life and the human mind. The Gathras, although one of the most ancient sacred texts in the world, are an inspiration to us for how to live a good life today. It awes me how across the millennia, so much of it speaks to us now with such peculiar relevance and immediacy. It is as though modern concerns were implicitly understood and advocated for by the radical poet seer of the ancient Iranian people. He seems to touch on freedom of thought, female autonomy, the plight of the vulnerable, social justice, animal welfare, sustainable living, and even inclusive spirituality. How wonderful to think a document so ancient can also be so progressive. For example, the Yata Ahu Voya or Varyu mantra, mantra speaks of Horamasta's support for the poor. Worthy and chosen through Asha are they, the Ratus throughout the world who bring enlightenment to the world through deeds done on behalf of Horamasta, who has become the advocate of the impoverished. Yansa 27:13. That speaks to me better than y'all know. Worthy are, I'm gonna read it again. They didn't say to read it again, but I'm gonna read it again. Worthy and chosen through Asha. What is Asha? What is Asha, people? Higher form of consciousness. I want to get the word that they wrote, so I'm actually taking notes how I'm supposed to, which is truth. Asha. And then I get to write it how I want to write it. So back where I was. Worthy and chosen through truth are they, the Ratis. We don't have that one, but I have to look that one up. Throughout the world, who bring enlightenment to the world through deeds done on behalf of a Horra Master, who has become the advocate of the impoverished. Y 2713. Another example of the importance of free will in making the right choices in life. When these two spirits come to a confrontation, one must decide on that eternal question to choose life and growth or the opposite. With this, one must decide on how they will align until the end. Will they choose to align to Druj and deceit in the worst of all existences? Or will they be Ashavans for whom enlightenment awaits? Yanza 34. I would like to note something about Ashavans. Ashavans sounds like a follower of the truth. A follower of this truth within my religion because I believe that everything is about spirit. That's the reason why Jesus came to show us that the Holy Spirit was the truth to the way of the light, and the light is your holy birth within the constellation and understanding who you were within your level of samsara, which is death and rebirth, to enlighten yourself outside of that and not just break free of the cycle, but understand what the cycle has been teaching you thus far. On the importance of resisting injustice for me, a key catalyst in my fight against all forms of slavery and discrimination, the Gathras say, may none of those truly devoted to the ways of Dhruj reach us with mantras and teachings. They will use their delusions to bring our houses, towns, provinces, and the nations of the land in a ruinous state. The recourse for them is our resistance. Nyanza 31:18. The Gathras also have a universal spirit, encouraging us to seek wisdom wherever it exists, meaning wisdom is not limited to Gathras. How generous and wise. We thus desire to be those who will bring magnificence to what exists. O Mazda and you other Ahoras, alongside the renovators and Asha, when we have centered our thoughts, wherever wisdom and understanding may be found. Yanza 39. The Gathas of Zarathrustra extraordinarily offer us a glimpse into the heart and mind of a Bronze Age seer. In words of unsurpassed beauty and sophistication, the ancient Iranian poet depicts his passionate relationship with his God. This foremost divinity, the wise Lord. The poet sees the creator of virtue, purity, wholeness, eternity, power, and love. The poet's words touch on his own life and struggles, his relationship, and ideals. Above all, they depict his revolutionary understanding of God and of humanity's relationship to a higher spiritual order of reality. As a literary document of such antiquity, bridging the personal and the mystical, they are entirely unique. I recommend all those who seek enlightenment to read this new publication of the Gathras in all its poetic beauty, translated by a devoted young scholar of Zoroastrianism, Pablo Vasquez, who has transformed by the Gathras and become a Zoroastrian through its words. It will leave them inspired to become living Ashavins in their fight against the forces of darkness in the many forms they confront us today. Zarbanu Gifford, author, former director of Anti-Slavery International and Charities Aid Foundation India, award-winning human rights campaigner, founder of the Asha Sintra, and a knight of the Honorable Society of the Knights of the Round Table. I'm gonna write something there. Con Concibro Quisibra. We're gonna get into the translator's notes, and then we're gonna get into the translator notes, and that is going to basically, I'm gonna speak right now about what I have and how I feel about just reading this part, even though I kind of have add the stuff that I have neglected to speak about this far. And then I'm gonna end this recording or just write down when I stop, and then I'll get into the translator notes. And I know we are just listening to the forward, and it's 42 minutes in, but if you're actually looking at something past this word and you want to depict the wisdom within it, it takes a minute. So I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. Shavins. Shavins. To me, after reading this, and then basically the notes was about who this person is with Honorable Society of the Round Table, and this depiction of all this stuff, and reading these books. One thing that I have to put out to the people who look more like me than the people that you imagine by the names that I'm saying when I read this book. If you understand that, if you look at the dissemination of the original people within the town or the place that we call China, and we know what they looked like, they were swarthy in nature or they were black skinned. When we understand that Zeus, his grandson, was swarthy in nature, I'm talking about Ajax, and so forth. Be like even he was a melanated being. Learning that Lucifer was a melanated being. Learning that the original people of this land were melanated beings will have you open your mind a little bit more into what has happened. I have an inclination and a burden that's on my heart and my mind to speak about, because I understand that our truth has been disseminated through the people who took the sex or took the books that were written by the last true prophet, who was Ormasta in the name of Mani or Engramenyu Moya, because he was the one that they call Zoroaster in these books, and he wrote the teachings of Zoroaster in the, if you look back into the truth, his first teachings were to the king of the empire at that time. And he took it, and he was also somebody who was on the front line of the battlefield. So that should be something to open your mind on to what exactly I'm saying. And so I make the connection through the word, just through knowing the research that I've done and hearing the names and hearing the depictions and the titles upon people based off of what's happening or what I'm reading. And I could see where our truth has been broken apart and where people have assimilated within titles to try and take over a position that is supposed to be of blood. because anything to do with the original God's word is how you bind the truth within your nature. Your nature was given to you by the blood that was spilled for you to be here. And so to not appreciate the words that were spilled by your ancestors or the blood that was spilled by your ancestors is to damn yourself for all eternity. And then on top of that, for us to be given the truth of our spirit through the Canaanites in the form of Enoch, and to be able to read those writings today and see that the only thing we needed to do was respect the Jubilee as far as the harvest within our own nature, and respect the one thing, which is the damn motherfucking Sabbath, which is Saturday and not Sunday. He talks about hollowing thy sanctuary and hollowing thy tabernacle. And we hollow the sanctuary because we live within our sanctuaries. And that is why I say, I know I live in the spoken word. And if you understand the truth, we are all children of God. And this will release you of your burden of taxes within this land, because you pay no taxes because you're the owner of the land. But we don't want to talk about that one. We don't want to talk about the shit that AJ knows, because AJ realized what AJ is and what Ahmad is and what Amin means and what Jackson blood right is and what the Jenkins blood right is and who the Charles are to the other side of the land. But it is what it is. I'm just doing me real quick. I'm just reading. So within my teachings, you can see that I write my name down within its depiction of what it should be, as far as when I imply my spirit upon it. And this is my first name. Still Lakhmad, but you just put a little bit of respect on it. Within Ushtater, which is, say you, I'm gonna have to start writing. Joy be upon you. It's like Hamdulillah, joy be upon you. Joy be upon you. And Shavans, which are like the followers of the word, which is followers of truth, and teachers of truth, like the true believers within the spirit, because he said it leaves open a space for spirit. Followers of Hashah, which is truth, which is funny because if you ever watch Prince of Egypt and you actually hear the song when they're talking about Ashari or Ashara, so who the fuck is this Ashari and Ashara character? And that's funny because my name is my mom's name is Lashaira or Ashaira, because she understood that it's Shira, but if her middle name is Lare and she's a Capricorn underneath Saturn. If she understood what that means, she would bring her law, because her law is depiction of who she is within the eyes of God. But that's another thing. So I recognize that Shah is my true mother, the truth, because I'm a child of Solomon. Solomon, the great. Thruj being indicative of the Thruj in our pantheon within the Egyptians, it will tell you the true names of these beings, but it's whatever. Got that down. And Bohoyumana, which means, which was right mentality. I ain't got the magnet ain't magnet. All right, I'm gonna go take a little swig. I'll be back. It's 49 seconds. And no, it's not what you think it is. It's simply kombucha, niggas. It's a bomb ass kombucha, but it's kombucha. Woo. If your kombucha don't make you dance a little bit, you ain't doing it right. I ain't talking about the shit from the stove either. All right. Translator's notes. 4935. When translating and compiling this collection of old Aveston canon that includes the Gathras, Yasna Haptangati, and the most sacred mantras of Mazdayansa, I took an approach which was sorely lacking in all Aveston translations. Most translations either take massive poetic liberties to align the text to certain movements and or theological and philosophical schools, thus obscuring their original meanings, or are starkly literal and academic and thus lose all their poetry and spirituality. It must be noted that Aveston was originally a completely oral language and was written down long after the composition of the Avesta. My approach was to both painstakingly translate the Aveston text literally and listen to the liturgical recitations so that moments of emphasis and other poetic inflections would be considered. My translation is primarily not a fully academic work, but rather a work of true devotion that takes the literal meanings and gives them the poetic and spiritual quality and essence they deserve. I have restructured many verses grammatically from Aveston and used simpler synonyms than most translations to make the text readable to a modern audience, while maintaining their spiritual core lessons and poetry. That means I need to get my hands on the original text as well because I know who I am as a Valentinians or Venetian, if you guys understand me. I thought it's wise to keep over 15 different translations of these texts from differing sources and times open and ready for reference because it is foolish to think that a translation of the old Aveston canon is just the work of any singular person. Aveston is notoriously difficult to understand, and I fear that without the discoveries of an Aveston Rosetta Stone, all Aveston translations are at best educated speculations. My used study of these translations acted to further increase my knowledge and understanding of this ancient and liturgical language, particularly during difficulties in choosing proper wording. Readers will notice there is an Aveston glossary included to explain that which I feel should not be translated, as there are terms, especially those used as proper nouns in surrounding text, and those who provenances and mysteries that have many meanings and interpretations per word, and therefore translating them would be declaring a bias and doing a severe disservice to the text. I leave it up to the reader, with the aid of the glossary, to interpret these terms as they are enlightened through Asha. What I got is the Persians were the Egyptians that we consider ourselves a part of, and when the Egyptians, within the name of Abraham or Abra, the name of Asha, left and went out of the Egypt, he went up north, and that's where when that is, and when we seeded the truth within the age of the Canaanites within the walls of the Great Wall of China. And so that's what they were saying. And, that's why, you could see that this pulled into the teachings of India. India is pushing from Muhammad through Abraham, yeah, Abrahim, it's Abraham, not Abraham, because Abraham is connecting it to another lineage lower and higher, higher within consciousness, but lower within the time frame. But him is the Elohim, and that is who he was at that time of leaving the days of Kemetic principles, which is both the Kabbalion and the Gathras, which is why I have the Kabbalion with the three initiates. But back to away from the download, back to the word. I sought out translation notes and other writings from previous translators and related scholars to learn why certain terminologies were used, and quickly realized that most European and American translators from the 1800s and early 1900s oriented Mazdayansi text towards an Abrahamic and particularly Protestant paradigm filtered through an Orientalist lens, endeavoring to avoid this endemic as it is when non-adherents translated sacred texts. I studied the philosophy philosophies, linguistics, and cultural perceptions of historical Mazdayansa, especially pre-Islamic and Pahlavi Mazdayansa, alongside the cultures and peoples that had either a large Mazdayansa presence or a developed historical relationship with Mazdayansa. I have avoided using terms like good or evil, which is correct, and have introduced terms like virtuous and enlightened, which is correct, which fit the historical and cultural context of these texts. This avoids a cultural bias towards Abrahamic theological cultural thinking, as there is much baggage attached even to such simple terminology. I've also chosen to use Mazdayan's instead of Zoroastrianism in this text so that natively used terminology and the proper name of the tradition is used more and gets publical exposure. Considering this is primarily a translation of the Old Aveston canon, it constitutes most of this book, but some of the young Aveston verses, which surround and praise the text, are also included and praise the text are also included. The Gathras and the Yasna Haptan Kaitri are not dry intellectual exercises and should not be consistently interrogated for scholar purity. These are the core and most ancient texts of Mazdayansa, and I felt it important to include such young Aveston verses which are presented in italics to differentiate from the old Aveston canon and to prevent confusion. Some verses include a numbered parenthetical multiplier denoting how many times they were reciting during the reading, and adoration of the text to aid the reader in their spiritual engagement. My hope with these translations, the raison d'etre of the project, was to make these texts fully accessible to the modern reading public and to provide a clearer and unbiased presentation of the beautiful message, stories, wisdom, and poetry provided therein. I do this out of love for Ahura Mazda, the Amisha Spintra, and the Yazatra, and for the spread of spiritual teachings of Mazdayansa to all conscious beings in this material realm. May we all be blessed and empowered through Asha now and forever. Amen. Amen, brother. Amen. So the thing that I have to say about them saying what he's saying about the Abrahamic faith, I feel very biased because I've actually connected myself to the great deities within the Abrahamic faith, and I just understand that a lot of people have used the teachings thereof because he's had a long life and his people have had a long life to curate a experience to each one of these people who have used his teachings to find a way into his people's land, because I ever understand what Turtle Island was, and I understand how fertile the Americas were when we lived in motherfucking mounds, and to understand that Muhammad was a messenger God, and that we praise the God of Hermes, and we all live within the mountains, it's a mountain society, and when you motherfuckers, I ain't even gonna say no names, but when you motherfuckers came over here to appear upon our truth, you saw the first mount, which was at least 5 acres long and big, and you niggas couldn't figure out what the fuck was going on, and you thought we was all just, back, what's the word I want to use? They thought we were so far back into the days of man that we were still hunter gatherers, but we were not hunter gatherers. We were the truth and the way and the light, because there's no reason to put on the shit to prove something to some niggas who don't understand themselves when I understand myself or they understood themselves past the truth of the land and up to the bridge of consciousness within the stars and the seat of their home within the stars, understanding that there was a divine being within the truth of the name of the original Muhammad in the name of Maraku, or the original Mercury, Adamu, who's supposed to come back and liberate the people after they find the truth of the other world, or the other world being the other side of the land. Because over here we realized we were all children of Canaan. And if we were all children of Canaan, we all figured out our truth. And once you figure out your truth as your peoples and you come over here and assimilate back in the land, all you do is take care of the land and live merry and do whatever the hell you want to do. But on the other side, they were trying to find the truth of the power within the atom seeds. That would tell you where the difference was. And that's why we were over here praising Hermes and y'all niggas is praising Zeus. And I say more than Zeus, you want to like pull the teachings like this, that they were still looking for the King of Kings, and they were fighting within the Persian Empire at this time during the creation of this book, because you understand who Mani is. We don't want to listen to the fact that they say Mani, this was written 3,000 years ago, and we know that the kings of the time came about 2,500 years ago, and Mani came 200 years within that 500 years. So this is just really fucks you up when you think of time, but when you don't think of time, you think of people, and within people you recognize their name, and so the inclination of the spirit within the name, and then you contact the spirit within its signature, because once you combine it and bind it by its name and actually feel the liberation of whatever spirit or soul is upon you when you read the book, or do whatever teachings, then you will be able to recognize it when it's in other things. Because I know that this book here is not one of the Sasanian depiction. It's more of the enlightened mind of a Ahura Mazda or a Shu or a Shah. Being a Asha or a Shu is very close to Moksha. And if you understand that, to have the mentality portion of this is the Vohu Mana. And if you know, in the literal text, he talks about how the other piece of this within the Indian diaspora is the coming of Vishnu. It would put a whole lot of understanding where Ahura Mazda and Vishnu come to make the word of enlightened through Vohu, and the state of mentality within the heightened state of awareness through the AH, which is a very significant of the second coming of Muhammad through Ahmad, or if you understand, Allah, whatever, that's Mana. And that's just the masculine form of enlightened, because Asha is the truth. And if she's the one who split her seeds in two, then you take this is also whole because it's second to her, and this is also whole because it's one step down, both within the image and inverted within the mind, which is where we get the V instead of the A, and that's where you get the real seed of the truth of what we know about David's star, which is inverting it on his head, which is why Solomon was the true God and not fucking David, and even the son of him, which is Daniel, who tried to kill the damn dragons, which I'm still not fucking over. you know, was unright. But the one soul of the man is right. And we don't actually have his name, even though we want to say that it's Solomon, because Saul would be, again, son. And now I know it's not A, so okay, it's O. So O through who? Ohora Mazda through who? Osiris? Just it's O. And then Man through, the moon. But if you know that Amen was a king within Israelites, and my name is Amen, it just changed the O to the I. And the O and the I is just changing how the vowel sees here. Because if you're whole within the O, then you know full Nuberan or Nuberu, or not Nuberu, because Nuberu was a god. Nefertum, you're children of the Nephilim, which is from the waters. But if I know them, it's a different state because I'm sitting within the known and not within the aspect of finding out what happens. This is getting a little long. It's an hour and 3 minutes, so I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna stop it and start a new